Welcome to Dotted I's online training. This is a series of 5-minute tutorials talking about GIS. Tutorial 1 is an introduction to GIS. In this tutorial, we'll explore what GIS is, we'll talk about the GIS framework, and also discuss datasets that are available to GIS users. So what is GIS? Esri defined GIS, a Geographical Information System, as a computer-based tool for mapping and analysing things that exist and events that happen on the Earth. I like to think of a GIS as maps on computers. It's probably easier to understand what GIS is if we talk about real-world examples of GIS. Here's an example of a background map with some points of interest. This GIS system could be used for not only finding locations of particular services, but also finding suitable sites for new services. Another example of a GIS is to understand and reveal patterns in your data. Here's an example of ward boundaries, whereby the wards are coloured with a red colour to show high crime rates and a blue colour to show low crime rates. This third example allows us to understand spatial relationships. Here's an example of a 1 kilometre radial distance from a school. And by using the circle created, we can identify the pupils that live within that catchment area and outside of the catchment area. We can also use GIS for doing routing analysis. Here's an example of a point-to-point route between an ambulance pickup point and a hospital end location. And by generating the appropriate route, we can calculate the distance taken and also the time taken to cover that route. Further example of routing within GIS applications allows us to understand accessibility. Here's an example of a drive time isochrone, which shows 5 minutes from a particular location. This could be a police station, or again, it could be a hospital. Now we've understood real-world applications of GIS, what about the GIS framework itself? Well, to understand GIS, we need to understand where we get data from. The Ordnance Survey is a great supplier of datasets. Once we've received those datasets, we could store those in a database. But it's understanding how we visualize that data that's important. There's 3 real ways of visualizing GIS data. First method is desktop GIS software. These are often complex but very sophisticated packages, examples being shown in the diagram. Pitney Bowes' MapInfo, Esri's ArcGIS, and CADCOR's SIS GIS system. If we come back to the GIS framework, the second way to visualize GIS data is through an intranet application. These are commonly used within partnerships, whereby an organisation will want to share various data sets from disparate sources. Here's an example of one that Dotted I has developed for Buckinghamshire. In this example here, we can combine statistical information with mapping data. So if we were to zoom into a particular location, we can understand what's happening in that area, in this case the intensity of crime. It also allows the users to interact with the map and interrogate the map. The third way of visualizing GIS data is across the World Wide Web. Examples being Google Maps, whereby if we zoom into a particular location, we get the relevant map up. There's also additional functionality in these web-based systems, whereby we can actually generate routing and directions from one point to another point. Second example of a internet mapping application is Google Earth, whereby we actually take satellite imagery and apply that to a map base. In this example here, we've zoomed into London and we're overlaying the hospitals in London with a satellite imagery. A number of web systems now start to virtualize the Earth into a 3D model. And here's an example of Bing Maps by Microsoft, whereby the virtual map is extracted, heights are applied, so we have a better understanding of the real world. The most important consideration with regards to GIS is data. There's three types of data. Your background maps, which are essentially pictures on your computer. These could be satellite or aerial photographic images. Then there's a detailed ordnance survey mapping. These could be represented as points, lines, and areas. And obviously, there's your own data. How can we get your data into a mapping system, and what can we do with it? Looking at the background maps in further detail, as you would if you were using Google Maps, as we start to zoom into the map, more detail is revealed. We start off at a small scale, whereby major cities and major motorways are shown. And as we start to zoom in, local streets appear and local villages. Each time we zoom through the map base, closer and closer to a building, we start to get more information. In this example here, at 1 to 10,000, we start to see building detail. The second type of data is the Ordnance Survey's mapping data. For example, points of interest. And here's a map showing restaurants, hospitals, and maybe train stations. Second type of vector data here is line data. These could represent roads, or railways, or rivers. Third type of data is region data, whereby we could look at postcode boundaries. In this case, these are unit postcode boundaries. But remember, most important data is your own data. Here's an example of some bird sighting locations. With a relevant geographic reference, such as an easting and northing, we can take that data from Excel and plot it on a map in a GIS. However, simply plotting your points on a map isn't much use unless you combine all the other data sets. And finally, we have a map with a map base, some relevant boundary data, and your data as well. Hope you've enjoyed Tutorial 1, an introduction to GIS. Look forward to seeing you for Tutorial 2, an exploration of desktop GIS. Thank you.